thank you for the opportunity to be part of this urgent discussion. You heard it from Joyce, education is what children demand and also are entitled to. During armed conflict, education is life-saving for children, including the youngest. Yet, this week, the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Children and Armed Conflict reported that since the adoption of Security Council Resolution 2601, attacks on schools have increased by nearly 60%. Yet, despite the increased targeting of education, it remains chronically neglected, deprioritized, and severely underfunded. The sector is now at a crisis point, exacerbated by global cuts to humanitarian, development, and children's rights funding, and the risk of losing decades of progress directly threatens children's right to life, survival, and development. The latest global data on attacks on education and military use of schools are alarming. GCPA identified around 6,000 reported attacks on education and military use of educational facilities in 2022 and 2023, which is about 20% increase in comparison to the previous 2 years. More than half of such attacks were attacks against schools, meaning targeted and indiscriminate violent attacks on all schools, including kindergartens, preschools, non-formal education sites. In certain instances, schools used for sheltering IDPs or used to deliver humanitarian assistance. Countries most affected by attacks and military use of schools in 2022 and 2023 included Ukraine, occupied Palestinian territories, Democratic Republic of Congo, Burkina Faso, Myanmar, Yemen, Afghanistan, and Syria. Government forces remain the main perpetrators of attacks, which are often linked to increased use of airstrikes and explosive weapons in populated areas, to which we know that children, in particular younger children, are especially vulnerable. Regrettably, the true scale of attacks on education and military use of schools is likely greater than numbers suggest. Whilst data has become more widely available in recent years, monitoring and reporting systems remain weak, absent, and increasingly underfunded. Additionally, data is not systematically disaggregated by age, which hinders efforts to understand and analyze the drivers and impacts of such attacks on younger children. And in turn, of course, it undermines the prospects for accountability. The Human Rights Council has expressed serious concern about the impact of attacks on education and military use of schools on children through several resolutions. And the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Education has recently warned that the Council that the effects of attacks on the lives of learners are devastating. Children are disproportionately and differentially impacted and experience more difficulties resuming their education after an attack. Around 72 million children were reportedly out of school due to armed conflict and crisis in 2023, and this figure will likely increase in the future if attacks on education continue to rise. The loss of educational opportunities due to war leaves children more vulnerable to other violations, many human rights violations, including forced recruitment and sexual violence, and has lasting consequences for their social and economic development, as well as that of their communities. There's evidence from neuroscience to economics that the early years of a child's life lay the foundation for long-term health, learning, and behavior, and that weak learning foundations for children can compromise the long-term development of nations. Girls are specifically targeted in attacks on education, including disproportionately with sexual violence, and children with disabilities also face greater vulnerabilities and are uniquely impacted. The HRC committee interpreted the right to education as beginning at birth and closely linked to young children's right to maximum development, and has recommended that states ensure that education in emergencies is truly accessible and inclusive for young children through early childhood development and education programs. GCPA urges states to uphold their child rights obligations and take urgent concrete action to protect education during armed conflict and prevent violations of younger children and all children's human rights. The Safe Schools Declaration is a tool that states should use to enhance and accelerate the implementation of the UNCRC and the OPAC. To date, 121 states have endorsed it. We call on all states to do so, and do so this year, and call for endorsement this year, the very year of the 10th anniversary of the Safe Schools Declaration and the 5th International Conference, which will be hosted by the government of Kenya in November. We urge states to fully implement the Safe School Declaration and the Security Council Resolution 2601 with a child rights-based approach, taking into account younger children's unique voices, views, vulnerabilities, and evolving capacities. The Safe Schools Declaration Implementation Network is a unique opportunity for states to receive the necessary technical assistance on this regard. Let me conclude by saying that today is an opportunity to reaffirm that states have a clear obligation to ensure that all children, including the youngest, can exercise their right to education safely during armed conflict and crisis. Attacks on education and military use of schools must end. Early childhood development and education are the most effective strategies for states to achieve peace, security, and sustainable economic development. Thank you very much.